Unit 8. Introduction to ABAP Events. Lesson: ABAP Events. Lesson Overview. In this lesson, you will find out how an executable ABAP program is processed in an event control manner. You will learn about the most important basic events as well as their purposes, and you will be able to use them in your programs. For a business example, you are to fill your selection screen with default values dynamically, that is, with reference to the individual situation. Purpose and usage of ABAP events. When you start an ABAP program, all global data objects of the programs are first created in the working memory. That is called memory allocation. After that, the runtime system triggers various events in succession. If a processing block exists for a trigger event in the program, the statements of this block are executed in sequence. Structures and procedures of an executable ABAP program. So, for example, let's take a look at the following graphic. We have a series of events on the left side and an ABAP program on the right side. So, for example, when a program starts, then an initialization event is triggered. That is represented in the ABAP program with the ABAP statement initialization. You place a period after initialization, and then you can write your ABAP statements or your code block. Then the selection screen is displayed. When the selection screen is displayed, then you press execute in the selection screen or F8 on the selection screen. At that moment, add selection screen event is triggered, and that is represented in the ABAP program with the add selection screen ABAP statement. After that event, the start of selection event is triggered, and that is also represented as the start of selection ABAP program of an ABAP statement in the program. And then you can write all of your ABAP statements, and the writes will be included after the start of selection event is triggered. And finally, the display list buffer as list. Purpose of ABAP events. If values are assigned to the parameters variables in the initialization block, these are displayed as changeable default values in the input fields when the selection screen is displayed subsequently. You can use the describe value assignment in the initialization block to assign another default value, dynamic pre-population of the selection screen. If the user confirms with the F8 push button on the selection screen, his inputs are transported into the corresponding program's internal parameters variables, and the add selection screen event is triggered. Hence, the corresponding processing block is suitable for an input or authorization check. If no error message is sent in the add selection screen block, then start of selection is triggered as the subsequent event. The main processing of the program should then take place in the corresponding processing block. For example, we have this program. So first, the program starts. So the report first starts with the parameters with the PA_date variable like site datum, and with the default value site datum or today's date or the system date. So then the initialization event is triggered. So inside you can write an ABAP statement. The example given here contains a selection screen with an input field for a date. that is the parameters. However, under certain conditions, if the date of the same week, day of the following week is to be displayed as the default value. So if you, in the initialization you have an if, and then you can add 7 days to your default value date. After that event is triggered, then you return back to the selection screen and the date is displayed. Then when you press F8 or execute, you trigger the event at selection screen and the control returns to the at selection screen event. Here you can write any processing block you need to do. For example, you can write your select statements here, and then the select statements get or fetch the corresponding data, and then they bring it back to the screen. After that, the start of selection event is triggered, and then the write statement is executed, and the control is given back to the screen and a list is displayed. So let's write a program example using events. Let's modify our flight report program or our flight schedule event, either of those two programs, and let's add events to them. So back in the system, let's navigate to the object navigator and let's navigate to the flight schedule program. We're going to add the following events to our program. We're going to add the initialization event, where we're going to initialize our parameter airline so that it always displays the AA airline as the default value. Then at the selection screen, we're going to implement the authorization check and the corresponding select, or display the corresponding message if the user is not authorized to read the data. And finally, at the start of selection, we're going to write the results to the screen. So let's go to transaction SE80. We go to our ABAP course package. We open our programs and we double click our Z flight schedule program. We click on edit change. First of all, let's make the P-car ID obligatory. This means we cannot continue to process the program if we do not input this value. So after that, let's start with the initialization code. So after parameters, we write initialization, and then we can assign a default value. So let's assign as a default value AA to our parameter P-car-ID. Now let's continue with the add selection screen event. So we're going to implement the add selection screen for the authority check object. So if the authority check is successful, then we perform the select, and finally we can start the start of selection of the program. If not, then we display the corresponding message. Let's check the syntax of our program. Here we get an error. Incorrect in nesting. Before the statement start of selection, the structure introduced by if must be concluded by end if. This error is because we cannot have a start of selection inside an if. So we have to change our program here a little bit. So let's do this. Let's finish there. So at the selection screen, we check. If you have authority, then we evaluate the select, and we're going to mark a variable called flag as checked, and we need to declare that flag here. So local variable flag type C length 1. So if the select was successful and the authorities check was successful, then we mark the flag. Then we start the selection. So before the start of selection, we apply an if. If LB flag is checked or equals X, then we can print the message. Else, then we display the message that you don't have authorization to view the content. We hit the pretty printer, and now as you can see, our program is divided into events. First, the initialization with the default value, then the selection screen to perform the authority check and to mark our flag variable. And if our flag variable is marked, then we display the message. If not, then we display the other message. So let's always remember that we have to clean our variable, so we can use the clear statement to clean the contents of our variable for the next execution. Now we check our syntax, and you see the syntax is correct this time, and we can activate our program and we can run it and to test if it is running good. So as you can see, the default value is printed to the screen in the initialization event. That's why I'm displaying AA, and a flight number is not displayed, so I enter 17 and I execute, and the program is working as always. But now we divided our program into events, and we can use this event separation to maintain a better order and to follow a better logical sequence. Event block characteristics. Processing blocks cannot be nested, as nesting will contradict the concept of ABAP events. That is why when I placed the start of selection inside the if, the program showed me an error. As mentioned, if the processing block is missing, no statements are executed and the next event is triggered. The ABAP runtime system controls the triggering of the events and thus the execution of the processing blocks. Therefore, the sequence in which the event blocks are placed in the program is not important. If no blocks are implemented in the program, all statements are implicitly assigned to the standard processing block start of selection. That is also the reason why our programs could be executed. So until now, we have been reading all of our code in the start of selection processing block, because we never include the initialization event or the add selection screen event. For example, there is also the event add line selection, which is triggered when the user double clicks on the list. Program structure overview. Apart from the layout, the so-called flow logic of a screen also has to be implemented. This so-called flow logic of the screen is implemented on programs type model pool. This specifies which internal program processing unit modules are to be executed as preparation for the screen display. For example, data to be displayed, or as a reaction to user actions on the screen. And these reactions will be on the process after input. This is called the process before output, the PBO, or process after input, the PAI, on the screen. So if you want to prepare the screen for output, you put all your code on models that are under the process before output block. And if you want to process all user actions, for example, the user clicks on save, or he presses enter, or he scrolls down, you control all of those actions on models that have to be placed under the process after input of the screen. Your screen is no longer type executable program as we've been creating our programs. Now our program has to be type model pool. Together they form the flow logic of the screen. The flow logic does not contain any direct ABAP statements, but references to modules that are implemented in the program in the form of processing blocks, module and module. So for example, in the system, let's take a look at a model pool program, a screen, and its flow logic. So now, back in the system, let's create a program type model pool. So let's navigate to the SE38 transaction. That is the ABAP editor transaction. Here we can create programs. So let's create a program called the module pool example. And let's go ahead and click create. On the title, let's just write model pool example program. And on the type, instead of executable program, we select model pool. And we save our program in our package and in our transport request. Let's take a look at this program through the ABAP, through the object navigator, So let's go back, and let's navigate to the object navigator. And inside our ABAP course package, we can find our recently created program. So we go to programs, and we navigate to our C model pool example. So as you can see, this program looks just as any other program. The difference with this program is that we can create screens on this program. So let's create a screen. We will see in more detail screens later on the course. For now, let's just create a screen number 100 and let's click OK. Let's write a short description. So this is our main screen example. We select normal type screen and we click on save. Our screen was saved. Now, if we wanted to access this screen for our program, for example, let's go back to our program. So we double click on model pool, and whenever we want to access this screen, we just use the call screen ABAP statement and specify the number of the screen, in this case 100. This will cause our program to navigate to a screen 100. For now, let's comment this ABAP statement. So now if we navigate to our program and we expand the folder, we can see the screens. We have our screen 100. So let's navigate to our screen 100 by double clicking. Yes, I want to save. And in our screen, remember we were on the attributes tab. We have the element list tab and the flow logic. In the flow logic is where we have the PBO output and the process after input model. So this is the PBO and this is the PAI process block. So if we want code to present the screen before it is output to the user, we have to write a model, and we just write model and the name of our model, and then we double click, and then our program is going to create our model. Yes, here we can write our models in another include, or we can write it in the main program. For these types of models, I always like to create an include for PBO models. So let's create an include, the include for PBO for screen 100, in case we have more than one screen. So we write the name and we go ahead and click OK. Yes, we want to save, and yes, we want to save our program and our include in our request. So now here we can write, so inside the model we can write our ABAP statement. So write my name, just as an example. Let's go back. Yes, save. And the same goes for the process after input. We have to create models. Yes, and I like to create also a new include for my process after input models. And the same goes for here. You can write your ABAP code inside this model. So now you have ABAP logic for your created screens, and you have the flow logic, the process before output, and the process after input. We're going to see the screens more in detail on our course later on. You should now be able to describe the event control processing of an executable ABAP program, list the most important basic events and explain their purpose, use the most important basic events expediently, and understand the basics of PBO and PAI.